Questions?
You mentioned real briefly in one of your slides, you were talking about distributing, it was the slide about gas.
Yeah.
And you were talking about distributing individuals' data into different blockchains, I guess, so that you can secure it.
Yes.
So for example, a healthcare record might be individual doctor visits on different blockchains, whatever.
Yes. So the things you have to distinguish is, so you got storage function and you got blockchain functions, right? So typically the storage function is separate from the blockchain function. So the blockchain function is used in order to access that record. So that record might be stored even on AWS or on your server or mine. So the function of the blockchain really becomes to pull the record back together because it's a hashed function. It's an encrypted record at that point in time that doesn't have its place only on Azure or only on AWS, but hosts on many different systems is basically immutable at that point in time.
So I guess the question comes to, you talk about the changes in transaction costs.
Yeah.
And they seem to be going no place but up.
No.
No.
No, because look at it this way. Specifically on Ethereum, it's highly dependent on what's happening at that time. If there's a very popular ICO that people want to get a piece of, they're writing very high fees to their transaction. Because I can sit there and say, hey, I want to participate in this particular ICO, and I want to assign 1,000 Ether to this project, and I set my gas price as high as possible. So you can set it to $5,000 to get to the front of the line, have your transaction being executed first. So whenever, like the gas prices that were so high, I didn't research it, but there was something else happening at the same time that caused the prices to spike. It's a pure market system, right? So whenever the demand is high, prices go up.
But that's based on the transaction, not in general. If it's a particular ICO, if I'm running a healthcare database, if I'm running a patient database, an EMR, in the blockchain environment.
Right. You wouldn't want to do it on open source blockchain. That's the answer.
Okay, so then we get into a private blockchain environment as opposed to a public.
You're getting into a copy or you're getting into an entirely different blockchain that doesn't have the same restrictions as Ether has right now. The one thing to realize is most of this stuff is alpha, right? So there's really not a whole lot of utility outside of trading and ICOs at this moment in time.
So Mint Health's a San Diego-based ICO that actually does the decentralized healthcare right now. And one of the big problems that they have that has now really shifted where they're going, and it's one of the problems, I'm in the middle of a pre-ICO stage, pre-ICO right now, and we're kind of confronting too, is because of the treatment of these tokens as a commodity, that all of the tokens received into this token raise were treated as like income to this company, which is really just trying to serve this blockchain function and innovate in the healthcare data storage. So that's incredibly problematic. Actually, I can't speak more than that publicly about what they're doing about that. But what are you seeing in terms of a US-based company? They have to operate in the US. They're dealing with US-based healthcare. Our ICO has to operate in the US. We have to deal with our own markets here. What workarounds are you seeing to kind of deal with that issue?
Well, that's a whole separate presentation, but let me, what's the international tax accountancy you're working with?
Yeah, I remember.
They should know. I mean, I have a couple that I can refer to you in that sense. There's an international structure you need for that particular issue. In the back?
I believe you said that Ethereum and the ICO, a company would issue a new token, and that token would represent future sales, not ownership of the company. Did I get that right?
That's what most are trying to do. That's the vetted utility token, right? There are plays out there that just treat it like a security, and they register and sell it that way.
Does that not then pull the carpet out from under equity ownership? In other words, it's a new thing in which to invest in a company rather than equity.
People have argued that, sure.
Does it have any analog in investment history up to now?
No. It's an entire new paradigm.
Because it focuses on future sales and growth of the company.
Right. So what lawyers typically will relate this to is the golf course example. So you're building a new golf course and you're still building it, but you're starting to sell memberships. So I'm going to sell you a membership based on the fact today that I haven't built it yet, but you get either a lifetime membership, 10 years, whatever. I'm going to put a sticker price on that. You're thinking, hey, that membership will go up. There's a limited amount of people they're going to let in, so I'm going to sell you that membership for $10,000 or whatever you are willing to pay. So that's one of the typical examples that's being used in your case.
So you're kind of like buying a spot in line, hoping that it'll go up, but it might not, right?
Yeah, so needless to say, I can't speak to the intention of anybody who is contributing any tokens to any project, but here's a couple of considerations. Like, if you go back to this little wheel that showed where investments were being made into, you'll see, hey, some of this is infrastructure, right? And so there you don't really get anything back, if you will, right? So the idea is more that, hey, I like this idea. I want to vote for this, and the way I vote for this idea is I put actually my money in. So I want to see this idea out in the world to actually happen. And then there's other scenarios where I'm thinking, hey, this actually has great utility. There's going to be a usage case, and they're selling this for the equivalent of 10 cents right now. That's a good example would be Google went public 10 some years ago, right? And they sold their initial shares at $80 some, 84, I think. And so those are worth, I don't know what they're worth now, but a lot more. Anyway, so they could have also gone and said, hey, I'm going to pre-sell what I'm expecting to make in advertising. If you buy Google clicks right now, they're on average $1.25. Back then, if you bought Google advertising, you could buy a click for 5 or 10 or 15 cents. So if you had bought 1 million clicks, you could have made a lot of money by selling them today, so to speak. So that's the difference in, hey, I'm buying a piece of the company, or I'm buying a piece in perceived profits of that company. The difference is the token is almost immediately liquid. I can trade it, right? So that's why you saw those exchanges. All the larger ICO projects, they will turn around and within a matter of days, weeks, whatever, will list that token on an exchange. And in almost all cases right now, because new money is floating into the markets, those tokens go up in value because people diversify. There was only so many opportunities to put your fiat money into cryptocurrency, and you had a handful of them. Now you got 200 some, and you want to diversify your portfolio because you hold $10 million in the equivalent of Ether and Bitcoin. So you think, hey, maybe I should hold some kin. Maybe I should hold some other interesting project that I believe will be around in 10 years from now, and I get in now for a few cents. Does that resonate? You look confused.
So like, if I put my money, if I buy $50,000 or $100,000 worth of Bitcoin and I buy it from one of the, what do you call them, exchanges?
Yeah.
143 you said?
147.
147.
Yeah.
So am I able to watch my money grow like the stock market?
Yes. And I suggest just buy whatever you like, 5% of your current portfolio, put it in a conservative cryptocurrency, and just lock it away like you would do with any long-term asset.
One more thing. People have said that Bitcoin eliminates the middleman in some respects.
Yeah, the Bitcoin paradigm does. Yes,
like what, with an escrow company if you're buying a house, or like would that?
Well, by definition, by default, every blockchain transaction is peer-to-peer. So I don't give my money to a bank, and the bank gives it to the person that's buying the house. I give it directly to you. At least my wallet, it's in your wallet. No middleman required. And specifically in the banking scenario, that's expensive, specifically if you're looking at it internationally. And that's why the United States is actually not the best use case at this moment in time. So really, blockchain solves a lot of problems that other countries have that had most people or all people were unbanked. If you lived in sub-Saharan Africa, well, you never went into a bank, right? So now you have some form of app on your phone that will allow you to spend a virtual currency with a stranger that you've never met. You don't need an ID. You don't need to walk in a bank. You don't necessarily need to pay someone a fee, although most of those applications currently still require fees. There's exceptions to that, but they are small. But at the end of the day, those nations are leapfrogging the entire industry, the entire infrastructure that we built around what we consider finance, right? I assume everybody in the room here has a bank account, can walk into a bank, has a credit card, etc. But there's billions of people that never had that privilege, and they will look back at us in the sense of, why would I need a building? Why would I need a bank teller? Why would I need to give Visa 3% of that transaction? I can just send you $1 million right now, and you have it, and it leaves my pocket. Just like similar paradigm you saw just a decade ago, where there were huts in sub-Saharan Africa where obviously no one would ever dig a ditch and pull in a phone cable, but now all of them have a wireless phone, right? So they never had the need for that infrastructure. So the United States, in that sense, from a banking and finance perspective, has a lot of technology debt. You have heard that term before. That has a lot of vested interest in not wanting too many people look at these opportunities. Anybody here has heard of M-Pesa? Okay, a few people. So M-Pesa was a currency that kind of developed almost by accident. So people had phones, and the way most phone systems work in sub-Saharan Africa is you walk into a little outlet, think of a 7-Eleven of sorts, you pay cash, and they load up your phone with minutes so you can use it. Well, they developed a way where you can send those minutes to your family and other people, and so people figured out, hey, 100 minutes are worth 10 shekels. I can send you 100 minutes, now you have 10 shekels, right? And so now this is an entire industry and payment system in sub-Saharan Africa, to where they had no payment system at all, no ability to create a bank account, no ID. They don't need an ID for that. This gentleman?
So regarding smart contracts, what's the mechanism or mechanisms for confirming that a transaction, seller sold, buyer received? I'm assuming it's code.
Yes.
Does that reside in the blockchain, or is it on the web?
You program that mechanism. So it could be the very simple smart contract is typically the ERC20, which is the ICO, right? So I create a new token. So Ethereum created an API that lets me put in a few variables. I give my token a name. I say there's so many out there. I say this is the relationship to Ether. It's 0.00001 Ether per my new Chris token, whatever that might be. And the entire transaction is done by you sending your Ether into that smart contract and getting Chris tokens back. But there is no limit, basically, to what you can do other than your fantasy to involve third parties. So it could involve another party having to sign off on that and having to do something. Those systems already exist. So where a notary public can certify himself on the blockchain saying, yep, I've seen this person's password, and then sign for that, so to speak, on the blockchain, and only with that second condition your contract gets executed. And again, write whatever conditions you want that someone is willing to accept. The point being there is, ideally you don't obviously want a third party, because that will just drag out the process, unless it relates to some world item that someone actually needs to physically touch and see and make a judgment call about, right? But other than that, if it's just the transfer of a digital asset, like another token, a software of sorts, there's really no third party needed on a regular basis.
Do you see the anonymous nature of transactions as something that must be overcome, or a threat?
So the gentleman is asking if the anonymous nature of cryptocurrency is a threat or something that needs to be overcome. There is a few thousand cryptocurrencies out there right now, right? So you can I can show you in 15 minutes how to tokenize you. It's really not such a big deal. No one might not buy you, but that's a different story altogether. But the point here is, you decide, you being the issuer of that token, what credential system you want to attach to that token, right? So there's Zcash, which its mission is that it's entirely anonymous. They don't ever want to get involved in people having to credential themselves. There are exchanges out there where you can buy cryptocurrency with a gift card. You don't ever have to authorize yourself. That's all different in the United States. So in the United States, they do your whole KYC, know your customer, AML, and anti-money laundering procedure, make you jump to a couple of hoops, and then at the end of the day also report your transactions to the IRS. Most other countries don't have that. Again, the United States is not the best use case as of now for blockchains. Other countries are either, I wouldn't say ahead of us, but are treating it differently. Like Switzerland has been very progressive. Probably most people have heard that Estonia has been very progressive. They are already moving government functions onto the blockchain, etc. So again, you can use particular currencies to be entirely anonymous, or you can make it entirely obvious. But honestly, Bitcoin specifically doesn't lend itself well to anti-money laundering issues because it's very transparent. So people that want to move large funds around, they're not doing it with Ether, they are not doing it with Bitcoin. They're typically doing it with suitcases of printed money.
How are the big banks using blockchain to improve internal operations?
Well, they have gotten involved. So JP Morgan is heavily involved in Ethereum, actually. So a couple of the other big players, Microsoft is involved, etc. So yeah, they're keeping tabs on it. They're also running their private blockchain, so that's a large difference. So it's a paradigm, right? So do you believe in Linux running the World Wide Web, or do you believe in Windows running the World Wide Web? You put your money where you think which chain will survive, right? So there's this law in evolution called the law of requisite variety, which basically states that the most flexible in the system will always win out, will always eventually dominate the system. So,
in your opinion, do you see just cryptocurrencies in general as the first step towards a global currency that will coexist with other currencies, or will it take over?
Right, so I assume everybody knows how currencies are vastly created right now. So we got this International Monetary Fund, and we got the SDR, like the special drawing rights that correlate currencies amongst countries. And right now, the US dollar currently is still the largest pool in there, but China got in there a couple of years ago, and China, as you probably know, doesn't have a big interest in the US dollar being that much of a player in this game. So my prediction is, yeah, there's going to be a large movement into cryptocurrencies, specifically for international money exchange, and you can already see that because of the large fees. If you ever send money just to the UK, it's a hassle, it takes forever, it's really expensive. So you can do the same thing inside of 10 minutes, right, from your phone with any amount you want, basically. So in that sense, the big picture first, in the sense of, yeah, big money first, is going to move, but you saw the chart earlier. There's only so many wallets out there right now. So right now, the people that are playing these games are really heavily involved in the actual infrastructure piece. They're heavily involved into coding, and or they're just speculating. But as soon as, my prediction, again, personal opinion, as soon as one of the larger countries, large in terms of GDP, commits fully to run on a cryptocurrency, like Switzerland comes to mind. I mean, Switzerland is rolling out 1,000 ATMs right now. Every train station in Switzerland will have a Bitcoin ATM. So outside of chocolate and cheese, I mean, Switzerland is basically a large bank, right? So if they are committing to this, you can bet that it's here to stay, right? So, personal opinion.
How does all the speculation, how is that affecting the value of the transactions? Or does it? That's the part I don't understand.
Well, the real traders, they know how to keep those fees low. So there are more sophisticated tools where you can pay your fees in a different currency altogether. So people that move large funds around, they don't necessarily use the same cryptocurrency that they are trading to pay the fees for it. Again, it's very complex, but it's more due to the fact what chain you're using at what point in time, and do you need to move the funds?
So in other words, it doesn't matter if the value of Bitcoin is 19,000 or 12,000. you're still trading peer-to-peer and getting the same value, regardless of what the trading price is.
Yeah, so look back at the exchanges. So the US exchanges typically will hold your money. So they are not really a good example of blockchain. That's why I said they are centralized. So they're fiduciary. They hold your cryptocurrency at that point in time. And so there you're not really trading peer-to-peer. If you send it to me, sure, I can decide whatever it's worth to me and say, hey, a Bitcoin is worth $15,000 to me. I can point you to people right now that say, hey, you want to sell me $1 million in Bitcoin? I'll take this all day long. Here's my price for it. And there's platforms that will facilitate that. There's also a platform where you can lend your Bitcoin, your cryptocurrency, to the platform and vice versa, and they will shell out a certain percentage of that. So, i.e.,
So is that what Coinbase is, an exchange?
Coinbase is a bank.
Okay.
Coinbase owns an exchange called GDAX. That's their exchange. When you buy currency on Coinbase, you actually initiate an ACH. That's why most people get confused. There's no money 2 days later.
Right.
Next question. Oh, in the
I
back.
have a lot of questions.
Sure.
So it sounds like Bitcoin cryptocurrency is traded on an international platform
Yes.
without any government regulation.
Well, some governments are trying to regulate it. So if you're in the United States, as I said, the exchanges are regulated. They have, well, not they have to be, but they are right now. And once in a while you hear announcement that China will shut down exchanges or another country will move in for different reasons. Most of the time, though, what you'll see is that those particular entities actually did outright fraud. They just were running a Ponzi scheme of sorts, where they were actually paying the next investor with monies from the first investor and so forth. So those were very obvious cases. For the time being, the regulators have been fairly neutral, kind of as in the beginning of the internet, where they were just watching it, thinking, okay, is this like telecom or what is it like? And that's why we have the more or less free internet the way we have it today. So the same way you can look at blockchain as a new paradigm for the internet.
So my first question was about tax. Of course, my second question is going to be about legal and regulation, but maybe a little more specific than the ones you've done so far. So obviously, for everyone, one of the biggest differences you want to really understand is the difference between a value store, which is probably what Bitcoin's best usage, and like a utility, true utility token that actually has cash flows and revenue, where you're buying future revenue, whatever that has utility in it. We're really trying to be a utility token, obviously. How do you deal with the issue that before utility, you have to create liquidity, and that raise process, which creates the liquidity to provide utility, how do you avoid that being a Reg A crowdfund? I mean, that's the bottom line, right? How do you do that?
Right. Perkins came up with a tool for that. You saw that. I'm not a big fan of it, but again, it comes down to somewhat of a smart contract combination and legal setup international that you'll need to avoid that. Again, and also there is no certainty to be had in the United States right now. The SEC could decide tomorrow and may decide tomorrow that all of those tokens are security, regardless of what you call them, regardless of what you do technological-wise.
That's why all fall under Reg A most likely, or what kind of an offering?
I give an entire panel on Reg A. I'll send you the video, but I mean, Reg A is very limited, as you know, and that's, to me, it's also like once you issue everybody familiar with Regulation A, you raise a limited amount, you can publicly promote that, but it's a limited crowdfunding, but here's the thing. Once the token is out there, you want to trade it, right? So how do you keep tabs on that? You can't, right? It's out of your hands. And so that's the other thing. So a lot of the wallets are really mini exchanges. So if you download a wallet, oftentimes, most of the times, it will have an exchange function between Bitcoin and the US dollar, right? And they keep adding currencies to that. So if you want your utility token to be useful, you go out to all the wallet providers and lobbying them to include your particular utility token, right? So at that point in time, how do you keep tabs on your quote-unquote shareholders? So that's why that's not a really good combination. So if you're doing Reg A, just do straight-out security, in my opinion.
Any other questions? All right, Christian, any final words or anything you want to promote?
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to promote, but so maybe just back to the last slide. So whatever industry you're in, I'd encourage you to think about it. If there was a for-purpose organization coming into the space, how could that look like? Can I structure myself this way? Because if you think of a for-profit organization, oftentimes you have inherent conflict, right? So you got operators who have a different interest from people that are employed by that corporation, who have a different interest from people who maybe just invested in this operation. So I want to pay maybe my employees the least amount. The employees wants to maybe just work the lowest amount of hours you can, create the most amount of income from itself. Investor might not even care what you do at all, as long as he gets his dividends and so forth. So with a for-purpose organization, a decentralized autonomous organization, you got the opportunity to structure it for one particular purpose and then align those interests of the shareholder, of the operator, and of the investor into whatever you're wanting to do. My favorite example, and I ended with that, is the Coronado Bridge. I moved here in 2000, initially thought I was going to move to Coronado. I loved riding over the Coronado Bridge. When I moved here, though, there was still a toll booth. I think it's cost $1.50 to cross the bridge, and eventually this toll booth was removed. The economic background on this was the bridge was built with private money. They were allowed to make a certain amount of profit. Once they made that profit, the bridge was turned over to the community. So personally, I'm a big fan of this particular paradigm. I'd love to see people doing the same thing to provide free internet to the world, free water to the world, free basic utility to everybody. I mean, we got, what, 6-7 billion people out there. Why do we have those differences in people paying $4 for a cup of coffee when another person has to live on $2 a day? That really doesn't have to happen.
All right, thank you very much for speaking to our group.